folks. We're in the Friday Friends zone. Got the standing up selfie stick today. You can see some of the clutter behind me. Little peek into my world of clutter. There's the whiteboard. You see the whiteboard? It's a little tour. That's the whiteboard where you see me stand in front of sometimes. Sometimes I'm standing right here like this. Used to seeing that, right? And other times you're used to see, there's Shiva behind me. And here's my Amma altar. Little tour. Okay, so we're doing, going to talk about the Friday Friends zone. You're in the Friends zone. And just look down here. All right, just call this up. So, of course, we're in this eclipse phase right now. We just had the eclipse early in the day on Thursday, early Thursday morning. We had the eclipse. So now we're, So now we're in between now the solar and the lunar eclipse. So the moon has gone is in Virgo now, and it's joined Mercury, Jupiter, Venus. So, you know, I talked about this Saraswati energy in the sky until like the 10th of September. And that's because Venus, Mercury, Jupiter, when they interact with each other, it brings out that energy of the goddess Saraswati. That yoga is defined specifically in several books, most notably Paladipika, which gives a lot of parameters for what could be considered Saraswati yoga. As always, because when I put things out, I get people who also want to, if not argue with me, at least want to sort of correct me a little bit or see if I know, or sort of test their knowledge, which is all fine, by the way. Sometimes respectfully, sometimes disrespectfully. But and then I clarify and explain that the real when you're looking at astrology like yoga and yogas and anything relative to scholarship and actual results, you have to quantify them. Okay, so in the text it says anytime Mercury, Venus, Jupiter are in houses 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10, and Jupiter is strong or exalted, it forms Saraswati Yoga. So it gives these very general parameters, okay, which there are many different ways where that can not really pay off very well. But when you extract the essence from that, you're looking at Mercury, Jupiter, Venus interacting, and some and very powerful, you know, and a very powerful aggregate of factors. Of course, they focus on Jupiter being the one that's the strongest, which there's some energy in that. You know, there's a case to be made for that. But when I see all of them in Mercury sign, and Mercury also there exalted, that also I know through experience, both my personal experience, my experience in charts, and seeing this over and over again for 15 years, I know that you're getting the energy of Saraswati, that Saraswati energy. So again, that's the reason to look at text, is you see the meaning behind what they're talking about. And you keep those things in mind. So, having said that, this is why this Saraswati energy of creativity, higher spiritual wisdom is very prominent now, and it will be until September 10th. Right now, we have Venus and Mercury and Jupiter, especially Mercury and Jupiter, as I record this on, what's this, September 2nd. Mercury and Jupiter are exactly joined, exact. That's what's called planetary war, but they're exact, the same degree of Virgo. So, a lot of potential for, again, being intelligent, being inspired about your teachings and what motivates you and what inspires you and true wisdom rather than pseudo wisdom. And the beauty and joy of that and creating something out of that, not just, having it be some idea. We tend to think, oh, I had this great breakthrough about something, which is fine, but it's really very fleeting. It's like, oh, I had this breakthrough about something. I really worked through something, and it was all just kind of psychological and emotional at times, and that's fine. That's fine. But when we actually do something about it, again, this is what karma is. Karma means action. It's what we do. What do we do? We have a breakthrough. Okay, did we do something different, or did it just some feeling and some realization that we had? Again, not to discount that. That's important, but did it lead to some action? Did that mean that we then, let's say, I had this breakthrough about my relationship with my mother and I really forgave her on some level about something. I really understand something. Okay. Did that mean that you actually called her and forgave her and actually did it? Or was it just something inside and then the next minute, 2 days later, she pisses you off and you're angry again? Again, so we kind of bounce around in these things a lot. So when these energies come together like this, it's a time to do something with it, not just be inspired by it, but to do something with it. So that's what happens when planets come together. They create a lot of karma, which means a lot of action, a lot of potential to take action on the thing, not just have it be some idea or some feeling or some emotion, but have that compel us to act. So these are big. This is big now, and I'm also talking about it because the moon is there today, tomorrow. So for the next couple of days, the moon is joined those planets. It's in Virgo for Friday and Saturday, and into Sunday. Let me just run this Friday. Yeah, and into Sunday as well. So we'll have the moon in Virgo with Mercury, Jupiter, Venus. Now there's some real tension there between those three planets. Particularly Jupiter has tension with Venus because Jupiter is our ideals, things that we're trying to rise above, and Venus is very much about the earth and pleasure and happiness and other people. And one of the big issues between Jupiter and Venus is the actual energy that we exchange with another person and our hopes and idealistic standards that we want them to live up to, that we want the world to live up to. So Jupiter is where we're looking for something high and otherworldly, actually, because we're looking for God and higher virtuous things. And Venus is very much about other people and what they do and how we need to love, find beauty in every little thing and find respect and appreciation and give it. So Venus, Jupiter have a lot of issues. Jupiter, Mercury have a lot of issues. And again, we're grappling with these things because Mercury's about all the details. And again, Jupiter's about the big picture. How does the big picture, Jupiter, come down to all the details? Mercury. It's great for astrology, discussion, dialogue. And you will know it's not coincidental that I waited to reopen my certification course until until the moon went there. So I reopened even my certification course today as I record this on September 2nd. And no, it wasn't because of the eclipse. It was because I wanted the moon to go in Virgo with Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus, because I know this is going to be a time when people are thinking more critically about what inspires them, and they're ready to, keyword again, take action. Act on it, right? The planets are the forces of karma, of action. They come together and they create the need to take powerful action. So I know that people who have been maybe on the fence for a while are wondering whether they're going to take the course for the upcoming year. I know they're going to be really compelled now to take action. So I waited till the moon went there. And the moon's going to be there over the weekend. My sort of personal version of how this works. You have a version of how it works in your life. What are you waiting to take action on? Or how are you looking to align the bigger picture, which is Jupiter, with the details, which is Mercury. How's that showing up in your life, and how are you showing up for that challenge? Or are you just running away from it because, well, Mercury's retrograde and we just had an eclipse, and it's a planetary war, and I just got into recent discussions about what we're now sort of calling astrological bypassing, where we take whatever in the astrological sky and use it as an excuse to not take action. And you can always find that excuse. You can always find that reason. But again, once you're really busy, I'll put myself in that category, you just don't have time to just say, well, it's going to be difficult for a while while all this is going on. I'm just going to make, sitting here and meditating my priority. It's like, I can't do that. I got to do readings. I got to teach students. I got to keep working. I can't just stop because astrology is difficult. It's always difficult. And understanding that the difficulty is just one part. It's the catalyst. It's also the catalyst for action. These are the kinds of actions we're supposed to be taking. As I've been saying for quite a while, the Saturn, Mars, and Scorpio is a great opportunity to take those kinds of actions. Right? Now, these three planets, where these planets gather in Virgo, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, this is where this is the catalyst for greatness now around this Virgo energy and Jupiter, Mercury, Venus. So it shows the stress and the tension, and also the action we must take, the highest action that we must take. When we're not in alignment with the highest action, we get stuck in the confusing inner conflicts around the planets. Like I just said, the inner conflict between, for instance, wanting my partners to, be God, wanting to stop using my brain and thinking critically and just, sort of bypass, because Jupiter is the planet of spiritual bypassing or astrological bypassing. Something bigger, something hopeful, something, that's not literal about taking action. Jupiter is about the bypassing. Because it bypasses the world. It bypasses action. It's very easy to get stuck in this quality of Jupiter, by the way, which says, well, there's this big thing that makes it so I can't, take action, or I'm not responsible. People do a lot of spiritual bypassing because of their religion and everything else in another way, but it's the same energy. Jupiter is where we want to rise above things because they're difficult, and our spiritual practices help us do that. But we can also take things like astrology or like other sorts of things and just use it as a catalyst to bypass. So again, instead of doing that, focusing in on understanding that we're doing this. Again, this is the lesson now, is to look at why we're bypassing. Instead of saying, well, astrology gives me a justification to do it, think more critically, which is Mercury and Virgo. And if you're not doing it, I'm here to make you do it. I'm here to talk about it. I'm here to break it down because, again, they're in Virgo. So I'm breaking it down and blowing it up a little bit because that's what Mercury does. Mercury says, wait a second, I'm going to question this. I'm going to question my laziness, my intellectual and emotional laziness, and the fact that I might be using astrology as a crutch to not show up, to just say, and again, look at not just the astrology, but look at what we're doing, because we'll keep bypassing for the same reasons. It's the same reasons, it's the same things I talked about in the eclipse, in the eclipse in Leo, the lack of confidence, fear of looking foolish, all of the stuff that I'm talking about. These are also where we shrink from the challenge right now. This is what we're being challenged to do, is to stay clear and to stay on purpose. And if we don't have the purpose, if we don't have the clear purpose, if we don't have the clear vision, then it's very easy to get into the bypassing and use all this astrology as an excuse for why we're not doing it. But these are the same excuses we always use. I don't have the confidence. Well, I came from this background and I wasn't treated well, and my mom treated me this way, and we just just the same thing over and over again. So again, these planets in Virgo, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, a time to really think critically and look critically at these things, particularly because Mercury is there. Mercury's the ruler. And Mercury's kicking. The one that's suffering the most is Jupiter. That's why I'm talking more about the bypassing part of Jupiter, not the hopeful part of Jupiter, not the inspiring part, but the bypassing part, and the understanding also as it relates to even studying astrology, that astrology might be something that inspires me and all, but it also can be something that's just my head is in the clouds about it. I don't really understand how it works. I don't really know how to put it into practice. I don't really know how to explain it. Those kinds of things. And the reason is because Mercury and Venus are much more powerful, particularly Mercury, because yes, Venus is in a debilitation sign, but Venus is getting powerful Nichabanga because it's with its exalted ruler. You can't get much more Nichabanga than that. For those of you who want to say, but Venus is debilitated, it's also joined its exalted ruler. So this is always the case when Venus is debilitated. It's usually either exchanging with the ruler or with the ruler. Anyway, but Jupiter is not in very good dignity in this case. Doesn't mean it isn't there. We still have the higher vision, but we're scrutinizing it a lot more scrutiny, particularly around the default tendency, the default lower tendency of Jupiter, the lower tendency, which is to not be inspired. To not be inspired enough to just say, okay, well, whatever, there's difficulty. Let me rise above the difficulty and stay focused. That's the benefit of Jupiter. Instead, it's like, well, but there's difficulty, so I'll just bypass it all and then just kind of not really do anything. Just kind of stay where I am. Ain't working. Anyway, think about that. So again, these days it's kind of hard with relationships, you know, especially, I mean, if you have a good relationship, then it can still be, you know, good. But there's a lot of these kinds of themes getting worked through, and particularly with the dignity of Venus and the challenges on Venus right now might not be the first choice, is to want to compromise and all that stuff. But, you know, one of the things that happens when Venus is debilitated, particularly if it's getting a lot of juice like it is, you know, there's still a lot of simple joy and beauty that can come, especially through things like sex and just being more simplistic and less nuanced. Because this is what happens. Venus is where we're sort of nuanced and sophisticated in our relating, where we're nuanced in how people appreciate us or don't appreciate us. In Virgo, again, it gets too literal and it gets corrupted. It's less tolerant and less open as, for example, when it's in Pisces or something. So stop trying to be nuanced with Venus energy. That's the point. If you can stop being nuanced, stop thinking critically around Venus energy, like with your partner, because thinking critically with Venus now is mainly being critical. If you can get out of that, to just say it bluntly, if you can get out of all of that and you're in a partnership that you like, you might be having some good, you know, sex and romance, and that goes a long way in, you know, keeping things light and having some fun as well, because Mercury's still there, and Venus, you know, one of the problems with Venus is Venus gets problematic when we place too many conditions on our happiness, and usually around what other people did. Realize for the next couple weeks that ain't going to be working very well. And very soon, especially once Venus goes into Libra, you're going to want to be getting along well again. So you could put some of that, if you could put some of that on the back burner for a while and just go out and enjoy yourself, there's a lot of potential for that. But of course, you know, we also have, I should say, especially over the weekend with the moon also there. So Moon Venus in Virgo does give the, you know, does really fuel the potential to have some good old simple kind of fun with your partners as well. Then getting into next week, Monday and Tuesday, the moon is in Libra. Which is, of course, about how we're feeling and how much we're willing and able to compromise. It can be, again, with the dignity of Venus, it might not be so easy. But again, you want to understand why the dignity or why the planet has a problem there, and it's much better than just saying, well, but Venus is debilitated, so it's going to be bad. That's just not right. I just broke down why it's difficult, because Virgo is very literal and systematic and focused on being protected from pain and difficulty. And again, how well do your relationships flow when you're focusing on every little detail about the person that you don't like, or that you think might even be dangerous, or something, where you're just being kind of nitpicky. How well do relationships work? Not very well. So if you can get out of that, which you can, then it can actually also bring a much greater appreciation for, and a much greater tolerance for them, because there's also a lot of empathy and a lot of compassion underneath that, and a lot of habits and a lot of habitual stuff that's directed at self-directed and misdirected. Because obviously we all know the things that irritate us the most about other people are the things that we'd like to change about ourselves, right? So again, all this stuff is going on. There are ways to approach that, where in some ways where there are good opportunities to take that on. Usually when the planet is debilitated, that's not the time. It's not the time to take it on. It's time to be aware that it's there and try to not cooperate with it. In fact, it's best to take it on when the planet is in the opposite place. The best time to really take on all that stuff is when Venus is exalted. Again, but then we tend to be polarized. We tend to get right, in line with the difficulty when the planet is difficult, and then just kind of unconsciously enjoy it when it's higher. When actually we're supposed to do the opposite most of the time. And so you have consciousness, and particularly, again, everybody should understand these things also play out relative to your natal placement. Those people who have a higher Venus already, whose Venus is really powerful, when the planet is difficult in the sky, it doesn't affect you as much, right? Whatever hurts Venus in your natal chart, when the planet gets in lower dignity, you'll feel it more then. That's the way to understand the transits. Regardless, the full power of that energy is always available to you. The highest possibility is always there, because it's a divine energy in you. Our predisposition is just our tendency and our habit. It's how it feels to us naturally through our ego, based on our past, based on our karma. That's what the chart is. It's like a habit that we have. But we can introduce consciousness into the mix. That's why I say these things to you, because it's hopefully to introduce presence and consciousness into this process for you. The more you understand what the process is, the more you're able to have intention and be intentional with it, rather than unconscious and like some kind of robot just triggered all the time. That's what astrology is. It awakens on an individual level, it awakens our tendency and allows us to have more intention once, not just the transits, but our dasha cycles, which are entire, cycles that make us deal with that thing. That's what astrology does. Because every moment we are free to choose. It's just harder to choose the higher road when there's difficulty in the natal chart. It's harder to choose it because your karma around that is more difficult. So then Thursday and Friday of next week, you'll need some reserve, because then the moon is in Scorpio with Saturn and Mars. And again, that's always a bit stressful. And of course, again, it can bring pressure in your personal life, your romantic life. I've also, again, if you have a solid relationship, then it can also be a time of great depth. The feminine signs in general, Virgo, Scorpio, are both feminine signs. They're internal reflective signs. Again, if there's a lot of trust in our partnership and there's a lot of, it can be a time, I'll just say it, of great kind of sort of sexual healing, especially with Scorpio, Saturn, Mars, and Scorpio. Again, what the problem is that we tend to be triggered, we tend to be insecure, we tend to have a lot of things come up because of that placement where we want to protect ourselves and where things get more polarized. But again, if there's trust there and you can sort of keep it simple, there is definitely promise there in that kind of depth, because sex takes us very deep. It also wounds us very deeply, so all that's there, of course. But I don't ever like to just focus on what could be the difficulty, because I also know that much of the time, as we're working through difficulty, those are also moments of extreme and enormous promise. When we enter them consciously, when we enter difficult things consciously, especially since Saturn and Mars have been together since February. So we're kind of finishing the cycle with these two. And in fact, yes, the next time the moon goes through Scorpio, Mars won't be there any longer. So this is the last transit of Mars through Scorpio, with Mars and Saturn both there. It's been that way since February. But this, next week, Thursday and Friday, as Mars goes through Scorpio, joining Saturn and Mars, as the moon goes through Scorpio, joining Saturn and Mars, it'll be the last time for, 30 years that we'll have Mars, Saturn, Moon in Scorpio. So we've gotten some practice with this energy. So it could be there could be a lot of healing around that at that time. This is also right when Mercury goes back into Leo, and also, I'm not going to get into all that, but for the most part, this next week with the moon join both the stellium of planets in Virgo and the stellium of planets in Scorpio, there's a lot of intensity there for sure. Also a lot of creative potential with your partners and all, and but also potential to work through things, there's definitely some beauty there also. But again, it challenges us. And as I've said, because we're very emotional, we tend to focus on the emotional part of the astrology, how it all feels, how it feels. Because that's such a deep sort of reference point to us, we tend to only want to do what feels good, and again, we need to pay attention to that to some extent. But often we're just using that to navigate our areas of discomfort, not because there's, for instance, any real danger, except for danger to our ego. We want to navigate things that make us uncomfortable because they also bring out parts of ourself that we don't like getting angry, and so when we face these kinds of moments, it's also a great catalyst for us to sort of be like the yogi. The yogi doesn't act in accordance with their likes and dislikes. They act in accordance with dharma, or what they know to be right. What is right? What is the best thing I can do here? For everyone, for me, for everyone, what is the real promise of this moment? And all we need really is to introduce presence into that equation, and then the power of the planets and of the moment is the power that we're using to navigate that with the most skill. And that's really what astrology is about. It's about understanding it each day. It's about understanding your tendencies as a person to step into this situation this way. And it's about, and in understanding those things, you can introduce consciousness and presence into those moments rather than just being triggered psychologically and reacting like a robot. And again, this robotic triggering is our default. And so again, when we look at these kinds of things and say, well, yes, the moments are going to happen. That's what it means. These moments are going to happen, and you're going to be put in that moment. But you're not necessarily going to be a triggered robot in those moments. That's never the case. That's never been the case. Every moment arrives as a moment of presence. And I don't like to use the word free will, because free will is often it's not a good word. Because usually when we're using our free will, we're willfully we're in combat against something. Whereas presence is an opening. Will is like this thing that usually, because we don't have any control over our ego, free will is often, for instance, people use their free will to go to an astrologer so the astrologer can show them how to outwit the planets and do a puja to beat up Saturn and win. It's usually because it pits us against it somehow. If that's not what you mean by free will, then that's fine, but presence is a much different thing. You become present to your tendencies, your samskaras, and if you're gifted with understanding astrology, then you know the specifics of that. You're not just haplessly confused about why you're getting triggered and why you're feeling this and why you're doing the same dumb thing over and over again. You understand why, and you can step into that moment with more and more presence. That's the whole point of it on a personal level. And by the way, astrology has so many more uses that have nothing to do with people and personalities and all of that. But that's the point of it. That's the reason I teach it. That's the reason I teach it and have courses and have students, because I want them to understand first what it is, what you're looking at, how it can be used within a larger evolution of your soul and of your consciousness. Not just as a way to try to win and intellectually, conquer the world and conquer the universe and beat up the planets, then the bad ones and the good ones and all that stuff and all that. So that's kind of what we're doing right now, and all of the intense energy. You want to introduce more and more presence and consciousness into your life, into your karma, into everything that you do. And moments like this, again, where there's so much energy concentrated around so many powerful things. I look around at I've recently got into a couple discussions where everybody's like, don't do anything, it's this and that, eclipse, Mercury retrograde, planetary war, Mars, Saturn, and Scorpio. You know what? Every planet right now is either with its ruler, joined its ruler. Every planet. The sun is in Leo. It is the ruler of Leo. Mercury, Venus, Jupiter are in Virgo. with Mercury, the ruler. Saturn and Mars are in Scorpio with Mars, the ruler. There is so much power right now. And instead we like waste it on, but it doesn't feel good, but I'm confused, but okay, well, got it. Is that ever going to change? That's the problem. The problem is not that it doesn't feel good. The problem is you only know how to react to your emotions and how things feel. You don't have another card in the deck. Like that's the only card that we know how to play is, but it doesn't feel good. There are 52 cards in the deck. Play another card. Right? Buy another deck of cards. A deck of cards that says, I'm willing to like evolve and live a life aligned with my purpose in my heart. If you're playing from that deck, then the power and the clarity and the potential is unlimited right now. You very rarely ever have every planet with its ruler. For example. So, again, in the midst of having the moon go through these places, it's going to be joined its ruler when it's in Virgo next couple days and over the weekend. And next week when the moon goes into Scorpio, even though it's with Mars and Saturn, it's with its ruler. So the power is there. The ruler is the one that gives the power to actually get the insight of that energy. So, I hope this was helpful. My phone battery is actually about to die. So if you have some questions, you can ask them in this thread. But I'm glad you all seem to like this. Yeah. So you see, I get fired up when these kinds of things happen. My Mercury gets really active because Mercury's really active right now. And I have Mercury and Gemini in my chart. So again, this is the kind of thing that happens where you see a lot of people, they stop thinking straight, right? Because Mercury's really powerful right now. And there's a thing, especially in Jaimini Sutras, where planets get more powerful the more planets they're joined. And Mercury's joined 2 other planets, and they're powerful ones. So those people with powerful Mercury have a lot to do. So I got to end before the phone battery dies.